works this time. It didn't want to before. Alright, so for as long as I can remember, I've always been extremely fascinated with kind of like the fantasy world because it's dark, it's enticing, it's romantic, and it's magical. It's kind of a little bit of everything that I wish real life could be, but we know it can't be. And I think a lot of this really comes from my parents. My mom is the kind of person who's always had her nose in some type of new book. And my dad is the type of person who like knows everything. He always has an answer. More often than not growing up, because I asked a lot of questions and I feel like I still do, he answered really sarcastically, giving me kind of like fairy tales. So I grew up listening to tales of gods, heroes, magic, and they really kind of helped shape who I am and what I want to do with my future. So sometimes he did give me real answers, they weren't as cool. Like, who wants to know that the sky is blue because it's a reflection of the ocean? We could be like, Zeus decided it was blue. So I was like really intrigued by the Greeks, especially. I think it comes from kind of like a background where I know a little bit about a lot of religions, and this kind of just stood out to me the most. They're super flawed, chaotic beings. They're not your typical like god of Christianity, who's like the pinnacle of everything. And my two favorite flawed characters were Hades and Persephone. So these are my versions of Hades and Persephone. So one day in Dr. Elsie's Greek mythology class, which is like probably one of my favorites I've taken here because I love Greek, she told us that there is no one true myth. And that's crazy, because if you think about it, most of you can sit here and think of one myth in particular that stands out to you, and you're like, this has to be real, I've heard it multiple times from multiple sources. It's not. Hades and Persephone's case, there's tons of stories about them. Usually they go in one of two ways. So the first way is Hades falls in love with her and decides to kidnap her, bringing her to the underworld to become his queen. She's not usually happy in this type of myth. The second version is where Persephone is not happy on Earth or Olympus. She decides to go to the underworld to become its queen. And usually this ends with her falling in love with Hades. So the myth of Hades and Persephone is kind of a little bit of everything that I like to read, and it's become a lot more popular in current YA stories to kind of have a Greek mythology inspired tale. But my story, Wilting in Reverse, is something that's new. It's a little bit different, and I think it kind of draws the idea of there's no one true story into it. So my novel, Wilting in Reverse, is a retelling of this classic myth surrounding the Greek god of the underworld, Hades, and his wife, the Greek goddess of spring, Persephone. It tells a new version of the myths, one where Persephone is still young, still beautiful, but she's also powerful. She's smart, and she's willful. She literally is a force of nature to be reckoned with. Right? She's not content to stay at home with her mother or her handmaidens, picking flowers all day. Instead, she is searching for something, anything in her life, to give it a meaning. Something Demeter tells her she doesn't need or will ever have. As tensions rise in Mount Olympus as a result of her disobedient ways, Persephone must think and act quickly to secure her freedom before it is taken completely away from her. She comes up with a plan, one that tests her strength, and will definitely try her, but it can lead her to a purpose in life if she follows it through, though it comes at a cost. I'm going to read two of my favorite scenes so far that I've worked on in the novel. I think these best represent the changes I've made to the mythology. I really hope that they'll get you thinking and leave you wanting more, because that's the whole purpose of pitching a book. Okay, you want people to read it. This first scene is really kind of the center of my idea. It's the first time that she can remember that Persephone goes into the underworld. And she starts getting a little bit more about Hades, who she's met a few times, but he's still, the really dark, mysterious, creepy guy in the corner of Olympus. And she really starts changing her idea. This is from Hades' point of view. Staring up at the ray of sunlight that shone through a crack in the cave's roof as she sat on the ground surrounded by rubble was a girl. With a bit of difficulty, she stood, and Hades watched as she ran a slender hand over her rear before bringing it up to the back of her head, rubbing the spot underneath the tangle of fire-red hair and letting out a hiss. Without conscious thought, Hades found himself standing behind her as she took in her surroundings. She must have felt his breath on her neck as she suddenly whirled, a gasp falling from her parted lips. Hades cocked his head to the left and followed her step for step as Persephone backed herself up against a wall. As he stepped into the path of light and his features became clear, Persephone crossed her arms over her chest and huffed, stepping away from the wall. Hades. Who else would I be? He smirked as she moved to the side, trying not to get too close to him. He followed, circling her, before stopping near a pile of rubble that she had caused with the fall. Tilting his head up, long dark hair falling from his eyes, Hades began to speak again. You've broken into my land. Even in the dimness of the cave, it would have been near impossible to miss the eye roll that she threw his way. No, Persephone corrected, I fell into the underworld. I wasn't aware that there was a doorway here for your grand entrance. It was an accident, she narrowed her eyes. Hades was enjoying watching her anger rise, but he felt the tug of the shadows once again and felt all playfulness drain from him. How did you do it? Do what? How did you, someone completely untethered to my land, suddenly create your own opening into it without my permission? Shouldn't be possible. How would I know it wasn't on purpose? He stepped closer until they were toe-to-toe, and Persephone had to tilt her chin all the way up in order to look him in the eyes. You don't know. No, I don't. I believe I've said that already. Neither of them looked as though they were going to back down anytime soon as they stood in silence. Persephone finally sighed and spoke. I must have reached too far down with my powers and created the crack. I tried to take a step, it wasn't enough. So sorry that my explanation isn't good enough for you, O magnificent Lord of the Dead. Hades didn't even crack a smile, just returned his gaze to the open sky that could still be seen through the roof of the cave. I suppose that explains it. So, Persephone threw her hands up as he resumed his silence. How do I get out of this God's forsaken place? The same way you entered. He pointed up and found himself letting out a clipped laugh as she kicked a rock. Great, just great. Thank you so much for all of your help. Nod. Turning on his heel, Hades began to walk away, only stopping once a noise caught his attention. Persephone didn't appear to have moved from her spot, but a small dirt pile in front of her foot showed otherwise. Shouldn't dawdle. The underworld is not a very forgiving place for the living. Persephone shot him an icy glare before he turned around, and again, the shadows consumed him, whisking him from the cave. The second scene is kind of the most pivotal point. She's already decided to make her plan to make her way into the underworld. Of course, she didn't tell anybody, and you kind of have to tell Hades if you're trying to become his wife. So, this is in Persephone's point of view. Did you ever stop to think about what your plan would do to me? Hades paused in his pacing and looked at her. You don't have to answer that. I actually already know what you would say. Is that all this was? You were just trying to seduce me, to force me to be the one to steal you away from Olympus so that you don't have to play the bad guy for once? He felt the palace tremble and took a breath to calm himself. You never would have allowed me to visit the underworld if I would have told you. I needed to escape my mother. You're the best option I have. Her green eyes were wild, and he knew that she was struggling to control her gifts before they overpowered her. I would have never turned you away. If you wouldn't have then why does it matter now? I could have prepared myself for this hell that you've unleashed upon me. I'm so terribly sorry that my presence here is so damning. Is this it? You're finally going to turn me away? He held her gaze and bit his tongue, not trusting himself to respond as her rage intensified. Persephone thrust a hand out to her side, and quicker than a strike of lightning, a tree limb fell towards her, dropping a ruby pomegranate into her open palm. I will not go back. Persephone cupped the fruit to her chest to protect it as he stalked closer. Quite frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn where you go as long as it's far away from my land. His voice was low and melodic, like a kitten purring, except in this case, the kitten was a very angry god of the dead. I don't know who told you that eating the food of the underworld would be a good idea, but it's not. Give me the pomegranate, Persephone. Her green eyes glinted as she narrowed them. I've watched you eat the food here. Why should you get to be an exception to this rule? Because I am the ruler here, and I am the ruler to myself. With her bare feet firmly planted on the black soil of the garden, she bared her teeth at him. I would rather take my chances in the underworld than on Earth or Olympus. Try and take this from me. Hades lurched forward as Persephone sunk her nails into the red flesh and pulled it apart, spilling juice and seeds all over the front of her white gown. It was almost hypnotizing to watch as the liquid trailed down her body to the ground, but he did not have the time to stop and appreciate the view. Hades grabbed the hat from her and pulled the shadows around himself, reappearing across the room where he threw the fruit to the side, red still staining his fingertips. It was not at all difficult, flower. As he stared at the goddess, Hades couldn't help but sharp intake of breath as Persephone pulled her lips back in a smirk. The young goddess of spring disappeared right before his very eyes, and he no longer recognized the woman standing across from him. She held his gaze, dropping her left hand to the top of her dress, and pulled out 6 seeds from her bosom, her eyes never leaving his. It was not at all difficult. Persephone. He took a step forward, and she continued to hold her palm outstretched, daring him to come near her for a second time. The coldness in her eyes froze his next step until shadow wound itself around his shoulder. He pinched the bridge of his nose and closed his eyes. Now you've done it. He flashed Persephone's side instantly with shadows and cupped his palm over the seeds before tracing a finger from her neck to her lips, painting her skin with the pomegranate juice. She looked up at him, clearly taken aback at the fact that he was doing nothing to steal the seeds away despite his proximity. The next instant, the door to the gardens was thrown open, and Hermes stood at the entrance. He spared a second look at the pair before clearing his throat. Hades, Hermes, you have been summoned to the Council of Mount Olympus to be charged with your crimes of kidnapping the goddess Persephone. So I've always known that I wanted to be a writer, kind of after I decided, modeling and singing and being a marine biologist just wasn't going to work out. But I never really thought that I would have so many pages done. As of right now, I have 60 edited pages of this novel, and it's really surreal to think that all of this is done before I graduate, and I have a great foundation to continue working on to get it published later on. I could not have done this without Dr. Messenger. She's not here right now. She had a family emergency, friend emergency, but I just want to thank her because she was so supportive. And I really want to thank the rest of the English department too, because I've learned so much that high school did not prepare us for. I learned a lot about reading and writing, and I feel like I'm going to take that with me kind of forward as I go on. I cannot wait to bring this novel to life, and I hope that you guys look forward to it in the future.
Questions, comments?
Why, since she wants to get away from her mother on Earth, why does she only eat 6 of the seeds?
So the next scene that you guys don't get to read, she actually doesn't have a chance to eat them. Hades takes them away, and as they're in Olympus, he lies for her. He's his usual sarcastic assholeness. That's exactly who Hades is. And Persephone realizes, he's okay with this, he's gonna let me stay, because they're very much kindred spirits. He's lonely and was kind of forced into a situation he didn't want to be in. She's lonely and she's definitely forced into a situation she doesn't want to be in on Earth. The 6 seeds, the reason I mentioned it, is because of the later myths where she only spends half the year with him and half the year with Demeter. And so by saying she ate 6, it helps me kind of just follow that path.
So this kind of feels more like you're telling Persephone's story than Hades' story? Were you ever drawn to Hades' story more, or was it always Persephone?
Yeah, so Persephone came first. I've always loved Hades more. I did tons of social studies fair projects and essays on him. But Persephone doesn't ever get a lot of stories about her. One of the things that I definitely learned from Dr. Messer's creative writing class is that people are shocked to think that she actually can do something, like her powers. So I really wanted to give Persephone some sort of agency and make people fall in love with her separate from Demeter and Hades. However, Hades definitely is a big part. It's the novel's going to be about 50-50. Most of what I've written so far is Persephone with a sprinkling for Dr. Messenger of Hades, who was really interested in seeing him. And so it helps me bring him to life, and I'm excited to get more of him. Yes.
Was the Frankly My Dear Don't Give a Damn allusion to Gone with the Wind?
I haven't seen Gone with the Wind, but I know, don't look at me like that.
Okay.
I'm acquired into it, so I feel bad. But I spend a lot of my time on Pinterest, and I have a huge board full of just my novel, and that was kind of a quote that kept popping back up, and I thought it would be really interesting to kind of put it in there because it does remind me of a lot of YA male protagonists right now. They're dark and broody and mysterious, and they're kind of mean to their females, but also they would do anything to protect them. So that quote kind of just found its way in here, and I think it really helps bring his personality out.
Because there's a kind of tenuous relationship between Rhett Butler and Scarlett O'Hara that I don't know if you're trying to mimic with Hades and Persephone. Are they going to be love interests?
They definitely are later on, but this is more like a process to them. It's not like love at first sight or love anything. Hades kind of falls in love with the idea of having somebody with him who's going to constantly test him, and Persephone actually falls in love with the underworld. She realizes she could do a lot as its queen, and then later falls in love with him.
Do they mention it?
Of course, they have to. I love romance. Yes.
So since, obviously you said you love romance, you love romance novels, it's kind of inspired by the hate at first sight trope.
I mean, yes and no. They've met each other multiple times. Obviously,
Yeah.
like they have a whole life together. But it's kind of like they don't hate each other. They just don't know how to trust someone new.
Okay. We got like 2 very limited glimpses, so I wasn't sure where you were
Yeah.
going.
It's kind of a mix of everything you've probably read in YA.
Yeah.
Yes.
So thanks very much for sharing it. It was very fascinating. I'm trying to understand the title. You know, I couldn't quite get it from the excerpts that you read. And I'm also kind of wondering if there's some kind of Orpheus Eurydice kind of thing here, but Eurydice choosing to.
Yeah. So the title is my play on Persephone. Most people, when you hear the myth, you think of the young goddess of spring going to the dark, creepy underworld and dying. Persephone actually comes to life in the underworld. So she is literally wilting in reverse. So it's kind of like my play.
She's blooming in the underworld.
Yes. She becomes more herself, more of a powerful force, and really can kind of help the earth and the inhabitants because of her role now as queen. They're definitely in the myth Orpheus because I'm trying to take all their stories, like all their punishments they deal out, because Persephone is usually one to deal out the like harsh punishments, and I want to do a play on it, but it's not really kind of like focused on that myth. It's really just taking the ideas of he's lonely, he wants to steal someone down to come and help him rule his kingdom. She's lonely and she wants to get the heck away from her mother, and she likes the idea of being queen. And it's kind of just a play on that. Yes.
Yeah, some of the language interactions are well, very contemporary. I think in an interesting way. That's something you do deliberately in the writing process, or?
Yeah, when I started this in Dr. Mester's creative writing class, I was trying really, really hard to like do like ancient Greece, and that did not work. I don't know enough about the subject, and I don't think I can learn enough about it to like properly write it. So this is a modern retelling. It's very contemporary. You're gonna see like Dionysus has Burberry shoes because he's fabulous. Like he's amazing. Like Apollo's always in like surfer boy outfits. It's very like contemporary. And I try to do that because I think when I read YA, if I can't connect to it, it feels like an adult's forcing it on like teenagers. So I think like as a 22-year-old writing a YA novel, I really want to make sure that people 16 to 30 can relate to it. Yes, Dr. Cantrell.
Is it set in Greece still, or are you taking because you mentioned Apollo, a surfer boy, which would seem to like transplant the West Coast kind of Californian or Hawaiian or Australian aesthetic onto that character, but are you keeping it in like geographically?
So in an ideal world, they're really not on Earth ever for me to like clarify that. In my head, it takes place on Mount Olympus, which is in Greece, and the underworld, which is everywhere. So it's kind of a little bit of a mix of both. However, my idea for this is that the gods obviously travel, like they get to go freely move. If anybody's read Percy Jackson, you know, like the gods follow the people and like the source of power, and it's kind of that idea. They're gonna go wherever they want, but their home base is still Mount Olympus in Greece.
Thank you, Grace.